Hey everybody, welcome back to the Messy Middle. This is Anita Anello, your host, and today I have a dynamic guest with me. It's Tanveer Naseer is his name, and he is a thought leadership consultant and has written a book called The Leadership Vertigo. He's a guy that's been around for a lot of years. He has a podcast that he's been doing and hosting for about 10 years now. And it's actually his podcast is in the top 2.5% of podcasts globally. The name of his podcast is the Leadership Biz Cafe. And so, yeah, welcome, Tanveer. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thanks, Nita. Appreciate you inviting me to have me on your show.
Yeah. So we were talking about a couple of things as we were getting started here. And I'd love to be able to have the audience first and foremost just get a feel for your background and what you're passionate about. And yeah, go ahead and just introduce yourself a little bit and then let's get the conversation going.
Sure. This is one of the things people love hearing about is my background because it's so unorthodox for what people normally have in the thought leadership space. Most of the people in this field are former corporate people and so forth. And I actually come from a medical background. I actually graduated with a Master of Science from the Faculty of Medicine at McGill in pathology. So that's where my basis is in the hospital and the medical space. I went from working in the hospitals to working in the private sector for biotech companies. That's where I started focusing more on the leadership element. And from there, I just like some of our listeners thinking, you know what, instead of working in a company and you're just following directives and the goals of an organization, I realized there's something I needed to do that was something that was uniquely mine, a voice, an idea I wanted to share. And I started my own company. We've been at it for 15 plus years, and I'm just loving it. I love the work I do. I could talk about leadership at a drop of a dime. And it's because it just so interests me. It's not uncommon for me to bring beach reads when I go for a holiday to be a nonfiction book. And I remember one time my wife caught me reading a business book and she said, "You're on vacation. You're supposed to be relaxing." And I looked at her and went, "But I am relaxing."
Yeah.
And she's, "Yeah, I don't get that." And I'm like, "But it's what I love to do. So why wouldn't I bring it when I'm trying to relax and unwind?"
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what are some of the ways currently today that you're working out your passion for thought leadership?
Okay, so there's several. Well, as you mentioned, I have my podcast, Leadership Biz Cafe. I've actually been doing it for, I think we're coming on year 13 or 14 this summer that I've been doing it. So I'm one of the, as the young crowd goes, I'm one of the OGs of podcasting. I mean, and there's an interesting story which maybe might fit into our story of how we can make the transition from the corporate world to entrepreneurship there. I also do a lot of speaking work, keynotes, and workshops where I work with organizations. And I'm working with for-profit, nonprofit. I've worked with the military, with the government. I've spoken with organizations across North America, Europe, and the Middle East. And again, this is somebody who's not coming from the corporate world. I don't have I was a senior VP at whatever and so forth. This is something I built from the ground up to get this kind of platform. I'm also an award-winning leadership writer, which is why I wrote my book, Leadership Vertigo. I've won many awards as being one of the top voices in the leadership space. In fact, Inc. recognized me as being one of the top leadership thinkers and speakers because of my work. So it just shows you that if there's an idea or message or voice you have, you can create it on your own. Because I always tell people, in my space, I always feel like when I started out, everyone else who was in the corporate world was at the starting line saying, "I want to start my own business." And when the gun went off to start, I was still in the change room. So I had to catch up with everybody else because I didn't have those corporate connections to build a business. I didn't have clients who maybe after a year I could, poach and say, "Hey, I'm actually offering this service. Maybe you can hire me and bring me in to help with consulting work and so forth." I had to do that from the basement, forget the ground up. So if I can do it, I really genuinely believe others can do that as well.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit. I guess what I'm thinking is before we go forward, let's talk a little bit about when you were first starting out and you had this passion inside of you that you wanted to be able to be in that thought leadership space. And maybe in the early days, I'll make some assumptions. You can correct me if I'm wrong. You had these pictures in your mind of this vision that you wanted to be able to maybe be on stage. You wanted to be a speaker. You wanted to serve businesses in this capacity, in this thought leadership capacity. You had education, but you wanted to maybe bring it to the marketplace in a different way. So what were some of the things that you did to take this specialized knowledge, this passion, this desire, and like mold it into a business where you could do something? Like, how did you go and get clients? How did you let people know that, hey, I'm over here, like I have this passion and I'm really good at it? How did you start connecting with people?
I think, okay, so one thing I think that really helped is I went one level deeper than my passion. I went and focused on what was my purpose. In fact, that was one of the themes of, I did a TED talk as well. This shows you how broad I've been able to succeed in my business, where it was a ton of people, look, it's not about just your passion. It's about understanding
Mm-hmm.
what's your real purpose. Because when
I love
people
that.
see me talk about leadership, they see me on stage and stuff. That's one of the comments people get. Oh my God, I love your energy. I love how you're excited about this. And so some people will say, man, you're so passionate about this. And they think I'm following my passion. I'm like, and I always tell people, like, no, what you're seeing is me living my purpose. And the
Mm.
byproduct of that is you seeing me be passionate about it. And so I think one of the critical things that is important is that you understand what is your purpose. And so I remember the source of my TED talk was actually a Q&A when I did a keynote, and someone in the audience said, look, I've attended leadership conferences for 20 years. I've
Mm-hmm.
pretty much heard it all. So most times when I come to these things, I don't really find I'm learning anything new. But your
Mm-hmm.
perspective and your approach is so different. I'm like, where's this guy coming from? Because no one talks like this about
Yeah.
leadership. So I'm more interested in about you and how you came into this space, because there's clearly a story here. So this is what became the origin story for my TED talk, because when I shared my story, I got the most unexpected reaction in a Q&A session from an audience. People spontaneously started to applaud. And I
Ah, I
realized
love that.
they
Yeah.
loved this message. So, Anita, I'd love to share with your audience a bit
Sure.
of what I shared as a story. So, as I
Absolutely. Yes.
said, I started in the medical field. My drive was I wanted to work either as a physician, as a doctor, or in that space of treating patients. So my goal was, especially with pathology, was I realized that there are so many people who are living their lives and they get stricken by some ailment, which throws
Mm.
them off their vision, their goals, their hopes and dreams for their lives. So I was really driven to say, how can I help people get better and go back to resuming their lives? So that was
Mm-hmm.
my drive that I had then. And then a few years into my work at the hospital, we in Montreal, where I'm based, we had our first IVF clinic that was being set up, and no one in
Oh
Canada
yeah.
knew how to do this work. So they were looking for people who said, do you want to work in a 21st century clinical setting treating patients for infertility? We're going to train you to learn how to use all this high-tech equipment. I'm like, challenge accepted. I'd love to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So then I went into doing this, and people were saying, it's so surprising you were in pathology and now you're working in infertility. And I said, yeah, but I love the fact that here people are coming. Their biggest desire is that I want to be a father. I want to be a mother. That's this
Yeah.
dream I've always had. And I'm helping people create that life for themselves that they envisioned. So that
Right.
became my focal point for a while. Then when I went into the private sector and I started into leadership roles, I realized that here it wasn't about making sure people got the tasks done. One of the things, I was overseeing a number of labs, and one of the labs we had was we worked with radioactive material, and some
Mm-hmm.
of the technicians after a while started getting a little sloppy. The messy middle here, if you will, Nita. And we if you keep doing something, you start to get a little, you start easing off on your guardrails and how you should protect yourself. And
Right.
so I started realizing some of them were making mistakes that could put them in harm's way. So
Right.
I would go talk to them. When they saw me starting to talk to them, I could see the guard going up. Oh, I'm being
Mm-hmm.
recriminated. I'm not doing this job. I have to follow procedures. And I'd see it and I'd say, look, I just want you to understand, I'm not trying to criticize you. I'm worried about you,
Yeah.
because you're putting yourself at potential risk. And also, you might be putting your colleagues at risk. And that's why I wanted to talk with you. And the pivot I could see in that moment where they almost did
Yeah.
this head shake of, wait, you're telling me this because you're worried about me and not because, oh,
Yeah.
this is a bad thing. It got them thinking, what should I do? What can I do? So I started going through. So here's some examples just to remind you, these are the protocols of how we handle this material. And we
Mm-hmm.
started seeing a decline in radioactive contamination because people were now motivated saying, my God, my boss, he cares about me. And
Yeah.
so I realized at that point, it was really just, I want to help people be better at their jobs. So if you look at it, you can see the connection in all these jobs, even though they're so different. In each of
Yes.
them, there was this drive. Even the work I'm doing right now, where I'm trying to help leaders really show up to be the kind of leader their employees need them to be. In every aspect, I'm driven by how do I help you tap into your unique talents of what it is you want for your life and so you can live that life that you long to live. How can I help you be better? So that's
Mm,
my purpose. Any work I do, if I inspire, if I motivate, if I educate someone, say, now I understand what my employees need from me. Now I know how I can show up and help them succeed. And then I can look back and say, that's my team. And
yeah.
have that sense of pride that I'm looking out for them and how I'm cheering them on and making sure they succeed. That makes me feel good because I'm living my purpose. So
I
I
love
think
that.
I
Yeah.
think that's the first thing. I think a lot of times when we talk about moving from corporate to entrepreneurship, everyone says find your passions, right? But the thing is, passion is it's dating. I'll be honest with you. When you start dating someone, right, it's all exciting, it's new, the person's so exciting and mysterious. Oh, I want to learn more about this person. Maybe it then progresses and you guys get married, life starts settling into that routine, then everyone keeps talking about the passion being gone and so forth.
Yeah.
But I think when you think about its purpose, like, why am I committing myself to making this person such an important part of my lives? You don't take them for granted. You find opportunities to show your appreciation from why you value them, because it's not just about the passion, it's about why you wanted to commit to spending the rest of your lives with this person, why you wanted this person to be your partner. And I think that's the same thing we have to look at when we want to make that transition from the corporate world to entrepreneurship. What is your why? What is that thing that is uniquely yours that you
Hmm.
can provide value to others, that they can say, wow, I want to hire you? And I think that's how you get people who want to hire you, because they see that there's something unique that's yours. You're not just copying what other people are saying, but there's something that's uniquely yours. There's some value. And what's more, they see you care about this, right?
Yeah.
We do have to make money. Let's be honest. Money is
Yeah.
important, but that's
Absolutely.
not the driving force, right? The money is there because you want people to see that they're valuing what you're offering them. But it's really about, when I show up, I want to make sure we come out of this and you are driven to be better.
Yeah. So I love two big themes that you have in everything that we've talked about so far in just these couple of minutes. Like we're only 13 minutes in and I'm so excited. But the two big themes that I'm hearing all the time is it's all about people. How do we understand as people what I always refer to as these God-given dreams and desires that I have inside of me, but whatever it is that's really like inside of me that I want to be able to come out into the marketplace, into the world, into my relationships, and then connecting with people, really seeing people for who they are and
Mm-hmm.
seeing what, like the story of you describing, like the countenance on their face shifted from I'm worried that I'm going to get in trouble to wow, somebody really cares about me. That's so radically different. I love, love, love that because we as business owners, or if you're in the corporate space, you don't necessarily just do business to business, right? I know
Mm.
there's the B2C and all that, and B2B and all that kind of stuff, but people do business with other people. That's really the bottom line. And it's about that relationship that we build. The other thing that I love what you're talking about is I get this picture of the purpose is like right down the center. It's like the thread that goes through your life, but then you zigzag back and forth. And I might have a passion in this season, and then I might have a passion over in this season. And then I just look at my own life. Like in the corporate space, I went over here and learned more about this and then expressed my passion in a couple of different ways. And then as I pivoted and tried a new role, then I expressed my passion in different ways, but my purpose never changed. The purpose is consistent, and it's that thread, that line that kind of goes through the zigzag of life. Because I don't know why, sometimes I think we think that they're supposed to be like this, just this one linear path. We talk about it in our household all the time. We're homeschoolers. We've been doing this for 15 years. I always tell my kids, like, there's dozens of ways to get to your goals. You can go here, you can do this. There's not just one linear path to get to what you want to do in life. There's so many options. There's so much freedom. And without getting overwhelmed, recognize that there are so many ways that you can go after the things that you have passion about, but also line up with your purpose. So that is amazing. I love the way that you've described that. That's so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you nailed it. That when we think about our passion, just really think of it as being your true north, right?
Mm,
And when it's your true north, that makes it easier for you to explore. Look, I can, like you pointed out, Anita, I can go to the a little bit more to the right and see
mhm.
what's there and explore that and maybe gain some new insights because I know it won't deter me away from my true north. I'm always going to end up back in that direction. And I think
Yeah.
that's an important visual for people to understand when they think about their purpose.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. So one of the things that we were talking about as we were doing our little intro and getting to know one another is I was sharing with you my experience that I had in the corporate space. And so let's talk about that a little bit. So just as a quick recap for your audience, because I know a lot of my audience knows that, or somebody who's listening to the podcast for the very first time. So I had a specialized skill set. I was an expert at what I did. I had risen to a great deal of success. I was an executive in the tech space and had all the things. I had the money, the title, the accolades. Like I had done the work to be able to get to the level of success that I was going after. But I also very distinctly remember, so my let me just set the stage. I loved what I did. I love the businesses that I was in. I had owned companies before. Like I loved being in the corporate space. I loved the teams that I worked around. It was a lot of fun until it wasn't, because I distinctly remember getting to a season in my life, like climbing that corporate ladder and getting to the top and feeling like I feel like I'm choked out because the idea that there was two things going on. I felt like I climbed to the corporate ladder and I was like, is this it? You got to be kidding me. Like I did all these things, I sacrificed these things and I got to the top and I was not satisfied. I was not happy. I just lay it all out on the line here. I was not happy in my marriage. I was not happy in my job. I was not happy. We were starting to raise a young family. There were many areas in my life where I was really not happy. And I had lost a lot of the joy that I had had earlier in my life, but there wasn't anything that anybody else did wrong. Like it wasn't that my husband did something wrong and it wasn't that. It was all me. It was all internal. It was where my thought life was going and the way that my perception and what I was thinking about. And the other element of that is that I can look back now in hindsight and I can realize I had these goals in mind. And what I can see so clearly now is I was always like the goals, I'd set the goals, and I love to set and achieve goals. Like I'm a doer, I'm a task person. Like I have it all on my whiteboard. I'm really good at that. I love helping other people do that and strategically figure out the plan and map out the steps. That's in my wheelhouse, definitely. But what I found for myself, what I was doing is I would be setting the goals, and then either somebody I was working for would be like, yeah, okay, you got it. Now do the next thing. And that's super typical in the corporate space. Like, hooray, you sold $1 million. Okay, now go sell five more. At the snap of the finger, the goal line kind of moves. But I noticed that I actually was starting to do this to myself. I'd say, I'll be happy when I
Mm-hmm.
reach this goal or something like that. And what it really did is I'll try to get this on camera. I feel like all of my goals were always out of reach.
Yeah.
They were just beyond my grasp. And it wasn't until I started doing some inner work for myself and working with a coach and realizing, like, oh, wow, I've developed this bad habit of always keeping things for myself out of arm's reach. And then this, of course, you can imagine like the satisfaction just, it's like you're never really there, or you think in your mind, when I get to this goal, then I'm going to be happy. But you're just not, and you almost like your life starts to get on autopilot. So let's talk about that a little bit. Like you had some really amazing insights as we were starting the conversation about what does somebody do when they're in that spot and they just need help.
Look, I agree with you. It's 100% important that you have goals, right? Goals you need to have because that's how you measure your progress. I think what the problem we've all had, and I think it goes back to our education, and
Mhm.
it's not a fault of the education, it's more the education system, is we've all been taught that it's always about just going from one goal to the next goal to the next goal. Think about it when you were in school. Okay, I got to do well in this test so I can get a better mark so I can pass this grade, so I can get to the next grade. And then, oh, well, I'm in high school. I got to make sure I get good grades so I can get into this university. Okay, I got into university. Now I got to do well on this so I can get this. So every step, you're always like, okay, here's another thing. Here's another thing. But there's no real direction, right? You're just going step by step without this long view of what's the point, what's the purpose, where you're like, oh, then it'll let me get this job. Okay, and then what? Then I can hopefully settle down and get married. Okay, and then what? Do you know what I mean? So we're always like, and then, so it's obvious why we're never satisfied, because we keep going and trying to reach these goals. And sometimes these goals get redefined in that journey. Oh, now actually we need this now from you. We need that from you. So as you said, it starts pulling away. So of course we're going to feel this discontentment. So yes, the goals are important. It's how we measure progress, but it's not what our focus should be. Our focus should be on the journey. That's what we should be focusing on. What is it that we want to do with our lives? What's the unique value that we can share with the world? And I know some people are listening and say, okay, Tanveer, I can see you're a type of person who you're just dynamic. You love talking. When I was young, I was an introvert. And I mean that in the true sense. I had probably 2-3 friends. That was it. So if one of them was sick, or both, one was sick, one was away because they went for a family vacation, when recess came, I was by myself. Okay, that's who I was. And I remember when what made the trigger for me to change was when I switched from elementary school into high school, and those 2-3 friends of mine went to a different school. And now I was in another school, and everyone knew everyone, and I knew no one. And I was like, okay, I can't keep doing this. I got to stop this cycle. And I forced myself to say, you got to be more outward focused. You got to fight these these tendencies to be that it's good to be introverted. I'm not saying you can't be introverted. Oh, we have to be extroverted. No, it's to not use your introversion as an excuse to not share yourself and your value with the world. Okay. I think that's extroverts. It comes easy to them, right? They're just naturally the life of the party and so forth. But if you're an introverted person, oh, I'm more thoughtful. I need time to think. I need some quiet space. I'm more the observer at a party than the engager. We got to train ourselves. So yes, but you know what? There's moments where there's something of value that you can share. It could be at a meeting, it could be at a party, whatever. And you should step up and share it, not just for yourself, but because those around you are missing out. And that's the important element we're not taking note of. So when it comes to making this transition, it's important that, yes, we got to set up goals because we have to measure progress. We have to see that we're actually doing stuff and not procrastinating. Okay. Yeah. But it's not about those goals. It's not like, okay, great, once I hit this, then. No, it's a journey. And like we were talking about, and you brought the example about how it's not a linear path, you have to let that journey flow. You have to let it take you where it's going to take you. Look, I have a podcast. I said to you, I started it 12, 13 years ago. I could tell you, why I started podcasting? The simple reason was because way back then, Guy Kawasaki's publicist approached me saying, because they knew I had a blog, it was really popular. He has a new book. Could we send you a copy and you can write a review about it on your blog? And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I really wanted to speak to Guy Kawasaki. He's a successful entrepreneur. Maybe there's something I can learn from him and so forth. So I actually sent back to them. Okay. And again, remember, I was normally an introvert. Actually, I have a podcast I'm doing. I would love to have him on as a guest. I figure, what's the worst he's going to say? Oh, no, he's not interested, right? Oh, he'd love to. We'll book something. I'm like, great. And then I'm like, oh my God, I have to come up with a podcast. So I spent that weekend with a pad of paper scribbling down, what the heck am I going to call this? I didn't even have a name. Forget, okay, what's the structure? What's this? But I said, you know what? I want to speak with Guy. So let's just figure this out. So I came up with the name Leadership Biz Cafe. And here we are 13 years later. I'm still doing it. So we have to be open, as you were saying, to be open to just going off the beaten track, because we know our purpose will always steer us back to where we need to go. So I think, yes, you need those goals, But you always have to make sure you understand it's not just about the goals. The goals are just how you track progress. It's being open to the journey and understanding that journey. It's not a road trip. It's not, okay, I'm going from point A to point B and I can just
That's
measure,
right.
okay, I'm almost there. And then I
Yeah.
ran at point B and I sit back, I relax, the money flows in. And no, you just keep changing, you keep evolving, you keep learning, because the reason is because when you're doing your purpose, you just want to keep feeding it. Oh, look,
Mm,
everyone's worried about AI. I'm fascinated by AI because I'm thinking,
I
okay, so
love it.
how is this going to impact our sense of purpose? I think it will actually cause us to have to focus on it more, because all those
Hmm.
rote tasks we do, AI will do it, but it
Yeah.
can't do our purpose. It can't create the value that is uniquely yours. So,
Right.
how do you share that value? It could be by writing, it could be starting a podcast like Anita and I have, it
Yeah.
could be going out and speaking. Whatever makes sense to you to share that value, that's what you have to do. And honestly, you owe it to the world, because this is a unique talent that is yours. Imagine if Nikola Tesla, Steve Jobs, Alexander Bell, any of these people decided, you know what, I think I'm just going to stick to this path my father took, and that's what I'll do because that's what's expected of me.
Yeah.
Imagine how much lesser our world would have been right now. It's the
Mm,
same for you. Now, maybe you're not going to be Steve Jobs, and that's fine. Don't aim to be Steve Jobs. Aim to be your best version of how you can be and the value you can provide. And that's what you should be focusing on. I've had people, Anita, who talk to me. I've done talks, and I just had someone say to me, where to say, I love hearing you talk. I just am so inspired, but I can never speak like you. And the last time someone said to me, it's like, I got to stop you because I keep hearing this. That's not the point. You're not
yeah.
supposed to be like me. You're
That's right.
supposed to find out what's your way of communicating. Say, look, if you hear me talk, I don't sound like other people who speak, because I'm not interested in copying others and say they're successful speakers, so that's how you're supposed to speak, that's what you're supposed to talk about, that's how you're supposed to deliver, that's what your slides are supposed to look like. Mine's all the way that makes sense to me. This is how I want
Yeah.
to present my ideas. So you need to do the same thing. What is your unique voice, and how do you share it so when people see it, they hear it, they feel it, they know it's you because it's yours?
Yeah. I like to say that you can see the clues that other successful people leave around. I'm not the first one that initiated that statement, I'm sure, right? Success leaves clues. But then what you do is you gather those clues from lots of different people that in an area that you're interested in, and then you make it your own.
Mm-hmm.
Because this idea, like this imposter syndrome and all this crazy stuff, like, no, you can only show up as you. That's all there is to it. Like, you're not going to be a replica of me or anybody else. No matter if, even if you try, it's actually going to be worse, because
Mm-hmm.
you're going to try to replicate somebody else in the world, and it's not going to feel authentic to you. So I do understand that imposter syndrome from that regard. But really what we want to do is, yes, look at the clues that are out there around you, but then deliver the information, deliver the service, deliver the product in the way that is authentic to you as a person. That's where you start doing like what we're talking about in this conversation. You start lining up your purpose as a person with the way that God's made it in you to be able to work its way out into the world. I
Yeah.
also agree with you wholeheartedly in that when we shy away from bringing our voice into the world, now I don't mean in like a negative complaining way, because I don't think that's helpful at all, in a way that serves one another, honors other people, recognizes the differences in people, and is okay with that. I look different than you. That's amazing. I love that. That's the way we're supposed to come together, to be able to celebrate the good in somebody else, because I don't have insecurities that say somebody is better than me or anything crazy like that. But when I bring my voice into the world, then I can share things that are only my experiences and only my expertise. And that's going to help somebody else. And so think of it maybe this way, if somebody's listening today, like there's a service or a product or a message inside of you that there are people in the marketplace, they'll only hear your voice. Right? I've heard my coach say this to me, Anita, there are people in the marketplace that they're dying figuratively dying to hear what you have to say, because they'll
Hmm.
only hear my voice when I show up, and my story is what resonates with them, and my experience is what resonates with them, and maybe yours does not, or somebody else doesn't. And so even though that other person, I don't know, I keep thinking of like Tony Robbins or Eileen Wilder or Ray Edwards or these guys that are experts in their space, that's amazing. But there are certain people in the marketplace that are only going to show up and listen when I speak, because of the things that I'm bringing to the table. And so I think Russell Brunson says in one of his books, he believes you have a moral obligation to actually share your message with the world. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Like being able to show up in the marketplace and share what you have to share based on this experience that you have and the voice that you have and the perspective that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, just to validate what you're saying, so in one of the recent keynotes I gave, I one of the stories I shared was of one of the most successful U.S. naval captains. And after I'd shared the story and I shared one of the lessons, I teased one of his lessons and I reframed it, saying, "Here's how I want you to apply it. Here's how we're
Mm-hmm.
going to make it." So that at the end, they actually had an action plan. The CEO came up to me and says, "You know what? It was interesting that you brought up his story because we had that actual naval captain as our
Oh
keynote
wow.
speaker a few years ago." And I'm like, "Oh, that's great." They probably are sitting there, "Yeah, we already know this, Tanveer." But here's where it gets interesting. He says, "I don't know if it's maybe because of where we were as an organization at the time. I'm not sure what it was, but it didn't quite resonate
Mm.
like your message did." And so this demonstrates to you. So you might be thinking, oh, like you brought Tony Robbins. Oh, I can never be Tony Robbins. That's not the point, because
Mm-hmm.
the way he speaks now, the message he shares resonates with that particular subset of an audience. But
Mm-hmm.
that's not who's going to be your audience, because what his message is saying, it doesn't resonate with them, or they don't get it. They don't understand it. And then you come around and you present your idea and your experiences and how your experiences shapes and informs your worldview. And suddenly people will look and they'll go, now I get it. And that
Yeah.
moment of clarity that you provide somebody, that's what you can't deny others, because people are out there going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But
Mm.
when you can give them that clarity, now suddenly you're helping to improve things. And so this is why we have to think about our voice being something that we should share. Now, okay, this sounds great, Taver. How do I go about doing that? That's
Right.
what I know. Everyone's $1 million question. All right, here, I got a 10-step plan. And if you send me your email to this, here it is. This is the most brilliant plan of what you can do. And that is, you just have to start. Believe it or not, it is
Yeah.
simple as that. And you have to start however it makes sense to you. Look, for me, I'm a writer. So what I did is I just started writing a blog, and I didn't focus on, okay,
Mm-hmm.
initially you can't help it, right? These are the goals. I started tracking weekly visitors, how much traffic I
Mm-hmm.
was getting on a weekly basis. And I would get all this tension. And after a couple of months, it's all I'd be talking to. My wife at one point said to me, "Wait, I just want to confirm something. Are you looking at to be like somebody who gets like a very popular website?" And I just go, "What do you mean?" She says, "You used to talk a lot about the ideas you were sharing.
Yeah.
And
Oh
now
yeah.
all you're talking about is, oh, last week I had this many
My numbers.
visitors and now I'm down by 10%. I'm trying to figure out why and such and so forth." And so I think this is where we have to be careful that our goals, yes, measure progress, but that's not the focal point. It's the journey. And I realized
Mm.
when I made that point, I don't look at those data points anymore because it's not informative. It doesn't tell me
Yeah.
anything. But what it does do is it keeps me this platform where people discover me. People Google, say, "Oh, I found you because I saw your article about organizational change and this thing." And I was like, wow, this is really different from what I've read elsewhere. Let's have this guy come and speak to organization.
Right.
So just start. Look, if you're in the corporate world, you have stories. And if you
Yeah.
don't believe me, just think of the last party you went to and you decided to regale people. Oh, you would not believe what went down at this meeting. Okay. All right. What went down that meeting? This went wrong and this went wrong. Okay. What should have happened? What would you have done differently? Write about that.
Yeah.
Share with someone, because maybe there's a first time managers out there saying, I got to lead a meeting and they're not going well. They come across your writing and go, oh my God, that's such a great point. I'm going to try that. They try it. They reach out to you. Hey, thanks for writing that piece. That really helped me. I'm not really a writer, Tammy. Okay. podcast. You could
Yeah.
use your phone. There's so many tools out there to start. Spotify even gives you a free platform where you can start your own podcast. They host it and everything. Just
Right.
start. Doesn't matter. Oh, I don't know how to do a podcast. I don't know what to talk about. Just talk. Find your voice. It doesn't matter. No one's expecting you to be perfect. Look, I've been doing this for 12 years. So look, it's easy to see me now. But if you were to see my first couple ones, I'm sure they weren't exact. I mean, okay. They were okay. They were good. But it took practice.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm doing it, and people ask me, one of my good friends, he asked me, so Tanveer, you've been doing podcasting for a long time. Do you see yourself still doing it? And I'm like, I love it. Just like Anita, you were talking about how you love podcasting because you get to meet people. Same thing here. I
Yeah.
love meeting people, but I also love talking with them about leadership and the challenges and their perspectives. So how can people resolve this problem? How can they figure it out? And my thing with my podcast is I always look for guests who I can learn from. Because if I'm
Mm.
learning from you, I know my audience is going to learn something. And so we're
Yeah.
all getting value from listening to you, sharing your voice. So there's stuff that you can share with people because guess what? You're in the corporate space where you are. You've reached the stage in your career where you have because you obviously have something of value that people appreciate, rely on, need, and maybe you're at a point in your career in your organization where it's not creating that same value as it used to, but there's people outside your organization who are dying for that
Mm-hmm.
value you create.
Yeah.
So go out there and share it in whatever capacity way you wish to share it. It can even be just the book, whatever it is. Just start the process and don't worry. Oh, is it going to be, if I write a book, is it going to be like the next Stephen King? Is it going to be an international bestseller? Oh, don't worry about that. That's not
Right.
the
Right.
point.
Right.
The
Yeah.
point is, I need to help people be better. I need to share my voice because that's what's going to improve things and make things better, which is why you're frustrated and thinking about making that transition stuff in the corporate world that's not working. So
Mm-hmm.
help others figure out how to make it better.
Yeah. So here's an interesting, this is what I keep hearing when you're talking, is that so let me frame this a little bit. Somebody's in the corporate space and they're worried about posting something on social media. They're worried about what's my boss going to think. They're worried about what happens if I do a blog or a podcast or whatever. What you're talking about is you're just going and serving. You're
Mm-hmm.
showing up, you're serving in the way that you naturally do in your corporate space. You're just doing it in a slightly different way. You have a different creative outlet. And maybe as you do that, actually, I dare say, maybe as you do that, it actually starts to relieve some of that frustration that you have as I'm not seeing things work the way that I want over here. So then, therefore, if I go and I put my serving hat on, so not my complaining hat, I just want to be clear
Mm-hmm.
on that. Because complaining hat, yeah, that's probably going to get you in trouble, especially if
Yes.
you're working for another boss and you're either trying to take your clients from your current organization. That's a no. I'm never going to advocate. We are not advocating that at all. Or you're getting on a podcast and saying, I don't know, something like my boss is horrible or whatever. The people are horrible or this situation is bad or whatever. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about showing up and serving in a different way and being able to almost open your eyes to more possibilities, to take that expert skill set that you already have and just have another creative outlet for you. I would even go so far to say I would challenge somebody who's really worried about doing that, or if you're getting like that anxiety inside of you right now, like, oh my gosh, she's talking to me. We have to do this right now. Yeah, you probably do, but figure out a way to do it in a manner that serves.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I'll speak to that Tanveer was talking about is that when you start, you're not going to be that good. Let me just say up front. Like you might not, and that's okay. One of the most amazing parts of the journey that we were talking about earlier is you try something, you figure it out. You might not be amazing at it at the beginning, but you learn, you grow, you get better, just like you did when you started your corporate career. So the thing is, when you move to the entrepreneur space, it's very interesting because we think sometimes that, oh, I'm just going to take this skill set that I have and I'm going to reapply it in this other way and I'm going to make tons more money and I'm going to work less. That's a lot of times the goals when we want to be our own business owner. So that's totally possible. That's part of my story. Took my corporate income and tripled that and worked anywhere from a half to a quarter of what I used to do. But I also have the opportunity, and sometimes it's been this way, to work twice as much as I used to in my 80-hour work week or something like that. Like I have the other opportunity of working more and making a lot less because when I'm not really sure if I'm worried about my vanity numbers, that's one thing that you were talking about. I'm worried about my social media following. Who cares? Just show up and serve.
Mm-hmm.
Bring some value to people around you. Yes, there's some nuances to learn and learning when you're delivering social media content or podcast content or even blog posts or any writing articles, any of the ways that you can reach out and serve audiences. Yeah, there is a temptation. We scroll through, we look at our numbers and that kind of stuff, and then we realize that's not why I do this. It's
Mm-hmm.
not, and I'm telling you, I've met people over the years. So I've been at this about 5 years. I've met and heard people speak, and they have ridiculously amazing high numbers of followers, but not necessarily a business,
Yes, exactly.
right? They could have
100%
a
agree with you.
100,000 followers on their whatever their favorite platform is. It doesn't matter, by the way, which platform you want to use. If you want to use TikTok or YouTube or LinkedIn, any of that, use whatever one you like the most. Just start there. Start with the
Mm-hmm.
one that's your favorite first. No problem. But they'll say things like, I have this big following. Like I've talked to entrepreneurs that aren't really having the revenue, they're not hitting their revenue goals. And they will say, but Anita, I have this big following. And I'm like, okay, but I don't really have the income that goes with it that I really want. I'm like, yeah, that happens. Because there's a strategy that goes along with not just putting content out there for content's sake or even content for followers' sake, but there's a strategy that you need to be able to walk through the process of saying, yes, I have this following. Now, how do I actually go through and convert them to real customers? And that's a process, right? It's being able to figure out those elements of the business just real quickly because I'm not trying to bait anybody to hear, oh, there's a secret process and I don't know what it is. And no, it's not that. It's you're serving in a manner that draws your right audience in and actually repels the wrong audience all at the same time. It happens in your copy, it happens in the way that you speak, it happens in the offer that you give. When you put an offer out there and it resonates with people, then they come and talk to you. And if you have an offer that has a dollar amount attached to it and a little button that says click here and buy me, then you start getting money.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really, my coach always says, the mechanics of the business and the entrepreneurial space and the online space, the mechanics are not very difficult. It's about 15% of what the whole thing is that you do all day long. It's the other 85% that is hard. And that's the head and the heart work that has to be done because we're used to this environment over here when we're in the employee arena. And by the way, let me just say, for me, I don't believe there's one that's better than the other, one that's higher than the other, anything like that. Just go do whatever you want. If that means you love your job and you want to do better at your job, please do that. Stay in that space.
Mm-hmm.
If you also want to transition over to the entrepreneurial world, that's great too. Go ahead and do that. But no one, at least for me, I don't think that one is better than the other, one way or the other. But yeah, I know, it's interesting to realize that the mechanics of the business are not that difficult. It's a lot of this head work and heart work that oftentimes we have to do. That's part, by the way, that's part of the journey too.
Mm-hmm.
It's
And
realizing that I have the confidence to say, oh, I can actually do this on my own. And I can make my business look however I want. If I want my business to look like I work a ton of hours, I can actually do that. I have that freedom. If I want my business to look like I have less hours, I said earlier, I'm a homeschooling mom so that I can spend some more time homeschooling my people and spend time with my husband and pour into our relationship. I can do that too. That's where the freedom element comes. So the freedom is you get to choose. You get to choose what you want to do.
yeah, absolutely. Look, one thing I would counsel anyone who's in the corporate space is the mechanics, believe it or not, you already know it. You're in the corporate space. So you
Yeah.
understand how, look, we can't create a product that is ubiquitous. Rather, we have to create a product or service that serves the needs of our target audience. So, yeah, you can go on social media and get lots of followers, but how do you know those are the right followers?
Mm.
You're just getting people who are basically being entertained, for lack of a better word, by what you're sharing, but they're not being necessarily educated to the point where they're saying, I need you to come speak to me. I need you to come work for me. I need you to come provide us with guidance so we can figure out how to apply this in our setting, in our environment. And that's ultimately what you want, is you want someone to say, these insights you're sharing, I get it, but I need help in understanding how to implement it in this context with this team in this environment. And so you already know the mechanics of this. You already understand that. And if you're not really sure and you're debating making the transition to entrepreneurship, intern at your company. You have this resource available where you can ask around. If you're not familiar with how your company understands how do we discover our targeted marketing, talk to someone in marketing, talk to someone in finance, just ask questions, use this resource to better understand what you should be focusing on. And again, to your point, Anita, you could say, look, I want to go and I want to create $1 million business and so forth. If that's what you feel your purpose is, fine. But I think, again, it shouldn't be about, I think, again, money is important, but you should focus on the purpose of, look, it's not just about just constantly going after, because now you're, again, creating another goal that, okay, I'll get the first million, then I'll get the second million. And it's just a never ending process. And granted, I'm saying ridiculous. Maybe I should say I get the first 20,000 and the first 30,000. Let's not be like, oh yeah, well, I go to entrepreneurship and instantly the millions start rolling in. That's not the reality of entrepreneurship. But if you think like that, you're missing out on the freedom that you can get from entrepreneurship, as you were pointing out, to live your life the way you want to live it, because we only have one. We're only going to be this age once. So if we keep saying, oh, when I retire, yeah, but we don't have the health that we have when we're younger. We don't have the ability to freely travel. Our kids, if you have kids, are never going to be this age again. And you don't want to miss out on seeing them at that point. So if you're finding your corporate life is not helping you live that life you want to live, and you're looking at entrepreneurship, absolutely, and know the mechanics, you already know it. The big challenge is for you to figure out, what's my unique voice, what's my unique value, and how do I share it in a way that people see that value and say, look, can we work on something together? And being open to those opportunities to work on different things. I can't tell you the number of different things. People find out the kind of work I did, especially when the pandemic hit. I always joke with people, like, I went from having a leadership consultancy, and after the pandemic, a multimedia company, because we started doing all this ridiculous stuff of green screen work and online video work and all this stuff. And it's just like, we never did that stuff before, but then we started doing it. But it was just these different paths that allowed me to continue to provide for my purpose and continue to share my voice and my ideas on helping people be better leaders and really show up and help their teams to succeed. So again, it's in you to figure that out. It's there. You just got to decide what makes sense for you to share that message consistently, because that's the key thing you want to be doing. And I just want to go back to something you pointed out, Anita, earlier. We said when you start, you're not going to do well. Here's the thing. People must say, yeah, but that's why I don't want to go and do this, because it's very public. If I go and I start sharing my writings, or if I start a podcast, or if I decide to write a book, it's like out there and everyone's going to see it. Okay, here's a bit of a reality check. You're in the corporate world. Everybody sees what you do right now. So if you make a mistake, you can't hide. Everyone's going to see it. Yet do you go to work going, oh boy, I'm really worried today. I don't know what I'm going to do. Sure, those are big projects that come up. Oh, this better land. I have that big meeting with the top leadership. But every day you're not having those fears and concerns. Why? Because about your capabilities, your competencies. So take that. Carry it through with you. If it's in the corporate world, you want to stay in there, keep using it. If you want to move into entrepreneurship, just take that with you and just start. And look, people aren't going to be, you'll probably be lucky if 5 people listen to your podcast, read your article. I don't think a book's a great place to start. I think you should start first building your brand, building your audience, but you're not going to have a huge number of people coming to see you. Why? Because first of all, you're still figuring out your delivery, your voice, what's the unique thing you want to share. And secondly, you haven't had enough content out there for people to really be able to find you.
None of the algorithms are
going to find you. So guess what? Don't worry. It could be the crappiest thing. Don't worry about it.
On the planet, they'll probably not.
Just start. And here's a trick that I use for people who are thinking about writing, because I get often people ask about writing. So there's a trick that Jerry Seinfeld has that helps him keep honest, where he says, I write every day. And he says, look, I'm not writing like I'm not writing masterpieces. Some of the stuff I'm writing is absolute crap that no one will ever see. But
Hmm.
I just need to keep that muscle going. Every day, I just need to keep using it. So he has a calendar he puts up, and every day he writes, he puts an X on that day.
Hmm.
And so he
Yeah.
says, I look at that and I keep telling myself, don't break the chain. You got a series of X's, keep it going. So do the same thing. If you're not sure, okay, I don't know what I want to write about right now, Tanver. I don't know what I want to speak about. Just start writing ideas. Maybe you're in a meeting and someone says something. Oh, you know what? I wouldn't have said that. Scribble it down and just build this pile of ideas. And then
Yeah.
after a point, go back and relook at them and go, oh, here's something, flesh it out. Maybe you'll read an article that, oh my God, I had an idea about this. Combine them. Now you have something you can share. So it's just the start process. I'm not saying you got to start a blog and, okay, the first thing comes to mind, I'm going to hit publish. It's just right for yourself right now. Coalesce your ideas, coalesce your thoughts, start seeing what things keep coming up that you keep wanting to talk about, and use that to help you guide what you want to share. And then once you figure you got enough, then say, okay, I'm going to write this little thing. I don't care if it lands, I don't care if people read it or not. I just need to start. And then that's how you begin that process.
Hmm. Ah, that's so helpful. And I love just the practical, tactical at the tail end
Mm-hmm.
here. We just say, just start. So great advice. Thank you so much. Are there any like last words that you'd like to be able to share with the audience about just taking one step forward?
Yeah, so one thing I would strongly recommend that if you're going to start this process is make sure you find your team. Okay, we can call it your posse, whatever you want to call it, your
Hmm.
group of people who you can confide in. This has to be someone outside of your family, your spouse, and so forth. It has to be somebody who understands what you're trying to accomplish, but also
Hmm.
understands what kind of mountain you're trying to climb. Okay, because you want someone who's going to understand, yes, this is hard. Yes, this is thankless right now because you're putting out content and beyond, I'll be honest with you, you're going to put out a lot of content and you're going to be creating a lot of value. And people who don't understand it's going to be telling you, why are you giving this for free? You should put it
Yeah.
behind a paywall.
Right, right, right.
No, they
No.
don't understand. Do not
Right.
listen to them. Okay.
Yes.
That's why you find 2 or 3 people, no more than that, even just one person who you can confide in, share your frustrations, share your ideas, share whatever it is, who you know. I'm not talking about a mentor necessarily. I'm just talking about someone who's going to be your kind of like an advocate who is going to understand because they've been there, they've gone through this process, who can set you straight when you start doubting yourself and remind you, like, look, what you're doing is important. This
Yeah.
voice of yours, people need to hear it because there's someone out there who's struggling. And until they hear your voice, they're not going to figure it out. So you got to keep in this game. If you don't, you're letting them down. Okay. You need that person who's going to give you that tough talk. But also, when you're having those struggles, they'll be able to understand, yeah, you know what? It isn't easy. And I get it isn't easy. And it's for this reason. And they can share their bruised battles that they've been through and so forth to show you, look, we all go through this. I think if you have that kind of support thing, that's what's going to keep you in the game. And always approach these things with a mindset of abundance. I know people will say this stuff and they'll think, oh, yeah, that's Pollyannish and so forth. You're a farmer. All you're doing is planting seeds. That's all you should be doing. And
Yeah.
just see what comes from it. I'll be honest with you. I tell people often ask me, like, oh my God, how did you achieve all this? If there was a 10-step plan, I would have written that book and I'd be like the next guru out there who's selling all these courses and whatnot. The thing I would tell people consistently is you just got to keep at it. And the reason you're going to keep at it is because you've got this abundance mindset that I don't mind sharing this value and just someone's going to benefit it. And I don't get
Yeah.
anything in return other than the fact of knowing I helped someone, because eventually down the road, that
Hmm.
will lead to these opportunities where someone says, I've been reading you for the last 4 years. You've helped me a lot. I was just approached by someone who was looking for a speaker, or they were looking for somebody to hire as a consultant, looking to hire someone as a coach. I thought of you. Would you be interested? Believe it or
Yeah.
not, a lot of the things I've gotten, that's when I start off, that's exactly how it happened. Is
Yeah.
somebody who was in my network who'd been quietly watching me, quietly seeing how I was showing up consistently every day, seeing how I was always trying to make sure I was creating value with no expectation in return, said, I want to help this person. I want to give him a chance to be put in the spotlight to shine, and everyone can see the value that he's creating. So
Ah, I love that.
really approach this work with an abundance mindset. I guarantee you, you will get more than you expected in return. And just look at go Google me, and you'll see. Remember, I didn't come from the corporate world. If I can accomplish all this, I can't imagine how
Yeah.
far ahead of this game you're going to be compared to where I am.
Ah, I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for just your generosity and sharing just everything that you have. We just really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure, Anita. Thank you so much again for inviting me to come and speak to your audience.
You bet. You bet. Have a great day.